Have you noticed that the hard, obsessive crush of limerence can feel 10 times stronger when the rest of your life feels flat? A lot of the time, that's exactly when a limerent object shows up, when you're running on fumes. You're exhausted, you're burnt out, or just completely uninspired in life. Everything feels dull, muted, flat, like you're living in black and white. The color is gone, and every day blends into the next. And then suddenly, this one person enters the picture, and it feels like someone turned the saturation all the way up, bright, vivid, in full color. This person is vibrant and intoxicating and glowing against the backdrop of your washed out life. Compared to the grayness of everything else, they feel magnetizing, impossible to look away from. Hi, I'm Madalena, and this is You Reclaimed. And today we're going to talk about why limerence, that obsessive, involuntary, all-consuming kind of attraction and romantic desire, why it can hit so much harder when you're burnt out and depleted or just unfulfilled with the rest of your life, because it's not coincidental. It's not just random. And it's definitely not just about how special and awesome this one person is who suddenly popped into your life. There are biological and psychological reasons why a limerent episode can really latch on to us and throw us off course when everything else in our lives feels, well, flat. And once you understand the reasons, you can start regaining control of your thoughts, not by repressing your feelings or by focusing on this one particular person, but by rebuilding enough stability and reward in your own life that you no longer need the limerent object to feel alive again.
Wait, did you subscribe yet? I have a lot more to share and I'd love to have you here for it. It really helps my channel grow and I appreciate it so much.
Limerence already feels like a drug. When you're at the height of a limerent episode and you're steeped in beautiful, delicious thoughts about this person, it feels like you've gotten your hands on the best stuff out there. But why is this feeling amplified when your life goes through rough patches and you're already not at your best? Because when you're burnt out and overworked or emotionally drained or just plain exhausted, your brain's reward system is running on low. Under chronic stress, your dopamine baseline, the chemical linked to motivation, to anticipation, to pleasure, it drops. And when that baseline is low, your brain starts craving anything that can spike it, that can bring it back up. Limerence delivers those spikes in a big way. In fact, it over-delivers by a long shot. A single text, a lingering glance, a daydream about this person can feel like a sharp contrast to how flat and lifeless the rest of your days feel. And it's not just dopamine at play. Stress hormones like cortisol and noradrenaline kick in too. These chemicals heighten your vigilance and sensitivity so that the limerent object, they don't just stand out, they literally glow. They feel magnified and larger than life and important, like the one vivid thing in an otherwise gray, muted landscape. In this way, limerence becomes a chemical escape hatch, a shortcut that your brain can take to feel alive again when everything else, well, it feels like too much. This is why you can know intellectually, on a rational level, that the relationship is uncertain, unsafe, unlikely, but emotionally, it can feel like oxygen because you've trained yourself without even realizing it to use limerence as a lifeline. And once you get hooked, the last thing you want is to lose that lifeline. Chronic stress takes a toll on your prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain responsible for regulating your impulses, for keeping things, life, decisions, risk in perspective, and for making good and stable long-term decisions. When you're burnt out, that system is running at reduced capacity. It's like trying to drive a car where the brakes are worn down and the gas pedal is stuck. The brakes, in this case, are your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that normally lets you pause and slow down and steer with intention and based on good information. And the gas pedal is your dopamine and reward system, which now gets stuck down when you're craving relief and there is none to be found. So even if you know that a turn up ahead is dangerous, you don't have the stopping power to resist anymore. That's what happens with limerence. The gas pedal is pressed all the way down. Your reward system is lighting up at every glance, text, interaction with this person because that system is already so depleted. But the brakes, the part that should help you regulate and help you keep things in perspective and not get hooked on this addiction, are too weak to hold you back. This is why you can know that contact with this person is not good for you, even though that it goes against what you logically want, and you can still feel so powerless to stop. Your brain under chronic stress simply is not wired to make the smartest decisions. And that's not necessarily a personal weakness on your part or a lack of willpower. Sometimes it's just biology. A car barreling down the highway with faulty brakes. Another piece of the stress and burnout puzzle is that burnout usually comes with a whole slew of unmet needs. Things that you might be too exhausted and overworked or distracted to even notice, let alone to have the time or attention to actually address in healthy ways. And I'm not just talking about stress. I mean deeper needs like novelty, play, creativity, a sense of meaning and purpose in your life. Emotional or physical intimacy in long-term relationships that can fall to the wayside. The feeling of competence and pride in your own accomplishments. When you're not on track with where you want to be in life, and really, how many of us really are? But at times when you become more aware of this, more conscious of it, a limerent object can easily slip into place as an instant shortcut to all of the things that you feel like you're missing. Because a shiny new love object that you have compellingly intense and obsessive feelings towards can represent novelty. They can make you feel seen. They can make your days feel less repetitive and more alive. They can make you feel hopeful and excited about the future again. They can spark emotional intimacy or even physical intimacy that you're missing and it feels electric compared to the flatness you might be living in. This is part of why limerence can be like a wrecking ball in midlife. When your life feels routine or stagnant, or you're in a reevaluation period. And in the next video on limerence, we're going to talk about exactly that, limerence in midlife and why it happens. And novelty spikes dopamine. So your limerent object can feel like the perfect fix to a dull, unfulfilled life. The problem is that limerence itself is rarely about this other person. And in fact, the reason we slip into an acute episode of limerence is usually because something about the connection is inherently unsafe, or there is a very serious mismatch between us. And we talk more about that throughout my limerence videos, which you can find linked below. There's an entire series just on limerence. So this person, they're far from being the answer. Limerence is usually pointing to the gaps and lacks in your own life, the holes that you're trying to fill. And instead of building new sources of meaning and reward within yourself, you start looking outwards, relying on the addictive satisfaction of limerent thoughts, of limerent fantasies. And contact with this person as little as that contact may be, to deliver all the good chemicals and emotional highs that you're missing otherwise. So when you're already running low on reward, as you are when you're burnt out or unfulfilled, the uncertainty in limerence is the ultimate addiction. It's the super highway to addiction. Maybe you don't fully know how the other person feels. Maybe you haven't revealed your own feelings to them. Maybe you don't know when or if you'll see them, if at all, or whether you could ever actually be together in a real life relationship scenario. And it's that unpredictability and that uncertainty, the not knowing, that takes over your brain and that delivers the perfect recipe for hard emotional addiction to this one person. Because your mind treats every ambiguous interaction like a possible jackpot. It's the classic variable reward pattern. The same mechanism that makes slot machines so compelling and so hard to walk away from. The less certain you are about the outcome, about what you're going to get out of this, the more your brain obsesses over it. And the more you think about this person, the more you unknowingly drive yourself deeper and further into addiction. This is how we end up hooked in deep episodes of limerence, because you're reinforcing the mental pathway that leads to the reward that you're craving, namely more contact with the limerent object. The trouble with limerence is that the high and beauty of limerence never comes on its own. It's built into this cake. At its highest point, what Dorothy Tenoff described in her research, the rush of euphoria, it's quickly followed by a flood of compulsive, intrusive thoughts. It's two sides of the same coin. The fantasy, the daydreams, the obsessive focus on the limerent object, it might feel ecstatic in moments, but in the next breath, they bring anxiety and craving and often outright emotional agony. So yes, you might get the win, your mood spikes, and for a little while it feels like oxygen, but then the crash of limerence inevitably comes. And if you're already burnt out, that baseline you're crashing back down to is low. Now you're not just exhausted from life. Now you're dealing with the emotional whiplash of limerence itself. And what do you want in that moment? To chase the next high, the next little spark of relief. Which means pouring more and more of your energy and attention into this person while giving less and less to repairing your own systems of rest and reward and stability. And in this way, it's a loop that drains you even further at the exact time when you most need to rebuild yourself, to put yourself back together. So then, how do we stop limerence from taking over when we're burnt out or stuck in a rut? Especially if limerence has become a coping mechanism for us, a pattern that we've learned to slip into again and again with different people. The mistake most of us make is trying to fix everything at once, which is impossible. We find ourselves in a deeply limerent state. We can't figure out why we're stuck here. Maybe we don't even know what limerence is, and because we don't know what it is, we get burnt again and again. And sometimes we repeat the cycle over and over with different people, wasting years of our lives. All without making the changes that would make us more resistant and more resilient in the face of limerence when it shows up again in the future. The fastest way out of this loop is not a massive overhaul when you're already burnt out. It's small, consistent upgrades that refill your own energy so that you don't find yourself running on empty anymore. That might mean giving yourself permission for more downtime without screens, without addictive distractions, and using that time for practicing restorative somatic practices. Practices that tap into replenishing your physical body, like breath work or stretching or body scans or meditation. It might mean bringing novelty into your days, a burst of color into your otherwise boring routine, a new cafe, a song you've never heard before, picking up a creative outlet that lets your mind or your body play again. These things don't sound like much on their own, but together they work to change the landscape of your life. Novelty taps into the same reward systems without deepening your obsession with the LO. Burnout primes your brain to latch onto anything that feels alive, and limerence is one of the most potent, but unfortunately most unstable sources of that feeling. The point isn't to shame yourself for being limerent. Feel the feels, that's fine. But then realize if you're using those feels as a coping mechanism. And if so, turn your attention back to where it's needed most and start refilling your own energy reserves. To rebuild your own sources of novelty, of meaning and connection, so that you're not depending on someone else's attention just to feel okay. Because in that way, you can go from person to person to person, depending on their attention in different episodes of limerence, and still never feel okay on your own. Because the stronger your real life becomes, the weaker the fantasy of limerence gets. If you want to go deeper into why limerence feels especially powerful when someone is keeping you at arm's length, watch The Fantasy of Being Chosen, Why Limerence Feeds on Rejection. That video will help you connect the dots between the validation we're craving and the burnout cycle we've been talking about in this video. Or stay tuned for next Saturday's video on limerence in midlife if that's where you find yourself. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.